Hello and welcome to section 2 of our project resource management knowledge area. So in this section we're going to be discussing estimate activity resources, and we'll be looking at how you're going to estimate what resources you require for your project. So let's dive in. Now, starting with an overview of the estimate activity resources. The estimate activity resource section is crucial in the planning of your project, and it focuses on determining the types and quantities of resources required for each project activity. All right, so in your project you have series of activities depending on the size and complexity of your particular project. All right, so of course the activity is the smallest unit in your project. Okay, so for each of those activities you're going to have to define the resources that you require, and then of course estimate the quantities required. Now, this sub-process also involves identifying and quantifying the resources such as human resources, equipment, and materials necessary to accomplish your project task. Focusing on the project's planning phase, you will understand estimation techniques and factors influencing resource estimation, which are crucial for effective project planning. And by the end of this section, you should be able to understand the objectives of estimate activity resources, and will also identify inputs, tools and techniques, as well as the outputs of this process. And you will also be able to identify the inputs, the tools and techniques, as well as the outputs of this process. You'll also be able to understand how this process contributes to your overall project success. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the meat of the matter and learn how to estimate activity resources. Now, the primary objectives of the estimate activity resources include accurately estimating the types and quantities of resources needed. All right, so the objective is to help you to be able to estimate the types and quantities of resources needed accurately. Right now, aligning resource estimation with the project schedule. Okay, so you're going to be able to align the resources, all right, that you have estimated with the schedule of your project. All right, like we talked about initially, the availability of the resources. Okay, you're going to have to align that with your project schedule and the timeline. Now, also to facilitate resource optimization for efficient project execution. So now you've identified the quantities, the types of resources, the quantities, the availability. So then also you need to facilitate, you need to optimize the resources, all right, for efficient project execution. So these are the objectives that are very, very important. So these are the objectives for the estimate activity resource process. Okay, so moving on. Now let's look at the inputs of this process. The first there is the resource calendar. Okay, resource calendars. This is the availability and schedule of resources, all right, for your project, and they are the key inputs for estimation. All right, so you need to understand the availability and the schedules of the resources that you will be bringing in. Okay, so this is going to help you in your estimation. All right, next is the enterprise environmental factors. Now these are external factors such as market conditions, and they can influence resource availability. All right, so you need to have this in perspective, all right, so as to know how and when the resources that you need for your project will be available. The next is the project scope statement. Now, understanding the project scope helps in identifying resource requirements. So you need to have a broad perspective of your project from the beginning to the end. So it will go a long way in helping you identifying the resources that you require to cover the whole project. So next is the tools and techniques that we use in this sub process. The first is expert judgment. Like always, you're going to need to consult with individuals or group who have expertise in resource estimation. So this is very important. Okay, alternative analysis is the next technique, and this involves evaluating various approaches to resource allocation. So as a project manager, you don't just want to have just one modus operandi, all right, or just one approach to analyzing your information, or one approach to resource allocation. So you need several approaches, and you're going to have to look at the various options that you have, and actually use the one that is most favorable and most applicable for your project. Published estimating data, utilizing existing industry data for resource estimation. So of course, in the project you're carrying out, it has to fall into a particular industry, all right, whether it's the construction industry, or whether it's the manufacturing, whatever it is, okay, IT and all that. So you're going to have to scout industry data, all right, to get information that will be useful and relevant to you in estimating your resources. Okay, so that's something you are going to have to look into. Now, what are the outputs from this sub process? First is the activity resource requirements. This is a detailed list of resources required for each project activity. So this document gives you a list of all the resources, all right, your human resources, your materials, materials you'll be looking at, okay, if it's raw materials you need, okay, what types of raw materials, all right, where are you going to get them, all right, is humans, okay, what categories of people, what are their job descriptions, all right, what's going to be their qualification, what are the job specifications, all right, and also their availability. Okay, so the activity resource requirements give you a detailed list of all this for each particular activity in your project. Resource breakdown structure, RBS. This is a hierarchical representation of resources by category and type. Okay, so we're gonna have that structure laid out for easy identification and allocation. Updates to project documents. Modifying documents like the project schedule based on resource estimation. So as you go along the project execution, and especially in this particular area of resource management, so you come across points or phases or milestones or phase gates, what we call phase gates, all right, that you're going to have to update the documents, your project documents. All right, we'll call them project documents, the documents that you're using for your project. All right, so one of these documents is your project schedule. All right, so when you're talking about your resources and their availability, so you may need to make adjustments at one point or the other, all right, in the project schedule. And it also applies to other project documents as well, not just the project schedule. Okay, now let's look at some key takeaways from the estimate activity resources sub process. Now firstly, granular resource identification. So this section emphasizes breaking down resource needs to a granular level for accurate estimation. Okay, so whatever your resource needs are, no matter how bogus they are, it will be helpful to you to break them down, all right, to the smallest units, okay, for accurate estimation. Aligning with project schedule. Now this is very, very important for successful project execution. Resources must be estimated in alignment with the project schedule to ensure timely availability. So you're going to have to be checking and marking, all right, your project schedule with the resource availability to ensure proper alignment. Okay, expert input is invaluable. All right, this is another very important key takeaway here. All right, it's always been said, expert judgment adds qualitative dimension, all right, to your project, okay, your decision making, okay, and in this case resource estimation, and that will help you in enhancing its accuracy. Okay, data driven decisions. Now I've mentioned before that you're going to be making decisions a whole lot of the time, and the quality of those decisions will be dependent on the quality of the data that you're using to make those decisions. Okay, so leveraging historical data and industry benchmarks contributes to this informed decision making. All right, continuous updates. As the project progresses, resource estimates need to be continually updated to reflect changes in scope or conditions. All right, so these are very, very important key takeaways that you need to get from this section, and when you do, you will discover that you'll be very, very accurate or close to perfect, all right, in estimating activity resources for your project. So that's it for this section. I'll see you in the next section. Cheers.